Hello friends, I am Arpit and I am here with today's analysis. Today is 29th of March and we are going to deal with three very important topics which are in news. The first is the Great Indian Bustard. The population of Great Indian Bustard has come down below 100. That is a cause of concern. Why it has come down, it is to be known. Basically, Great Indian Bustard's natural habitat is Gujarat, Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Karnataka. But specifically talking about Gujarat and Rajasthan, where a lot of renewable energy projects, particularly wind and solar projects, have come up, due to which high tension wires and low tension wires are going round in the region. These Great Indian Bustards, they collide with the high tension wires or they get electrocuted from the low tension wires and their lives are lost. Supreme Court in 2021 gave a judgment in which undergrounding of these wires was mandated, but this was questioned by the governments of Maharashtra, Gujarat, and Rajasthan, along with the central government in the court. Now, the Supreme Court has said to formulate a committee which will find a middle ground and has to submit its report by July 31st, 2024. Next is nuclear energy as a clean energy. Many of you might be wondering whether nuclear energy is clean energy or not, but yes, all of you will be surprised that the carbon footprint of nuclear energy is less than that of solar and wind energy. It is 100 times lower than coal fired power plants, but due to leakage hazards related to this nuclear power plants, this was not being promoted a lot. Japan as a country shunned its nuclear power program, but with climate change and global warming on the rise, Japan has reversed its decision and now is wanting to adopt more and more nuclear power plants. India is also on the same lines where it is projected to triple its nuclear power generation by 2031-32 from now. So that needs to be considered. Next is governor withholding assent to state bills. Not only the governor withholding assent, but the president also is withholding assent. And that is why the Kerala government has filed a petition in the Supreme Court challenging the positions of governor as well as the president of India withholding assent to the bills. Supreme Court in November 2023 gave a judgment in which, there were actions taken on the governor withholding bills of the state legislative assemblies, and Supreme Court intervened and streamlined that. But now their petition is against the president withholding their bills. Let's see what the Supreme Court says on this in the times to come. So let's get started with the first topic, the Great Indian Bustard. Basically, the count is very dismal. It has fell below 100. Now, this bird, we first need to understand that what is the habitat of this bird. Arid and semi-arid grasslands, open country with thorn scrub, tall grass interspersed with cultivation. It avoids going to irrigated areas, means it avoids green areas. Rajasthan has the highest population. It is but obvious, seeing the habitat. And it is endemic to the Indian subcontinent only. Endemic to Indian subcontinent means it is found over here. IUCN status, it is critically endangered. You can see the number. Important sites, Desert National Park Sanctuary in Rajasthan, Nalia in Gujarat, Varora in Maharashtra, Bellary in Karnataka, where this bird is found. But the major question over here is why the population of Great Indian Bustard has been declining. And UPSC is very fond of asking questions based on these lines because there's a case with respect to this in the Supreme Court. So let us find out the reason for the decline of population. And many of you might be surprised that the reason for decline of population of the Great Indian Bustard is renewable energy projects. A few days ago, we did this, session on solar waste, where we saw that Rajasthan and Gujarat are the leading producers of solar power generation as well as solar waste generation, that is but natural. So with a lot of solar power parks or renewable energy parks coming up in the state of Rajasthan and Gujarat, a lot of high tension wires are also there. The Great Indian Bustard cannot see in the front. It sees sideways. And it is heavy in weight. So whenever it is going or flying, it collides with the high tension wires, which causes its death. It also collides with low tension wires, and low tension wires are not so much interspersed, means the space between them is very less. And when they collide with, or when they sit on those low tension wires, these low tension wires, they collide with each other and there is short circuit, due to which electrocution of these birds happen and they die. And that has caused a decline in population of the great Indian bustard. And that is why a case was filed in the Supreme Court by a retired IAS officer in 2019. Supreme Court gave a judgment on this in 2021. Now that 2021 judgment is being challenged in the Supreme Court again. Now let us see. The population of great Indian bustard is dwindling due to the lack of action to convert overhead cable to underground power transmission in Gujarat and Rajasthan. The overhead cables, why overhead cables have increased? Because renewable energy projects have increased in these two states. The great Indian bustard lacks frontal vision. It cannot see in the front. So again, a fact which you should know. Due to this, they cannot detect power lines ahead of them, and from far they cannot detect them. As they are heavy birds, they are unable to maneuver across power lines with close distances. Thus, they are vulnerable to collisions with power lines, and this collision causes their death. In the case of low voltage lines, electrocution is often the cause of death. High voltage lines do not cause death due to electrocution, but cause death due to collision. This needs to be understood. That high voltage line, they collide with high voltage lines because they do not have that frontal vision and they are not able to maneuver themselves. They die. With respect to low voltage lines, when they go and sit on the low voltage lines, they are not interspersed too much. Means the gap between the low voltage lines is not too much. So when they sit, these low voltage lines, they collide with each other, and there are chances of short circuit, and when short circuit happens, electrocution happens, which causes death of the great Indian bustard. So this is what needs to be taken into account. Now, what have been the actions taken for this declining population? As I said, there was a case in the Supreme Court filed in 2019 and a judgment came out in 2021. The Supreme Court had ordered the power companies in the two states to make high tension power lines underground so that great Indian bustards do not get caught in the web. Now, actually, Supreme Court identified two areas. One was GIB potential areas and the other were GIB priority areas. In GIB potential areas, undergrounding had to be done, and GIB priority areas, we had to make other provisions like bird diverters had to be installed. These bird diverters are basically kind of mirrors, huge mirrors installed on these high tension wires, which make the birds feel that there is something ahead and they don't go and collide with them. They change their path, they divert their path. So in those areas where undergrounding is possible, undergrounding had to be done. Those areas were identified as GIB potential areas, and in those areas where undergrounding was not possible was identified as GIB priority areas, and there bird diverters had to be used. Now, this judgment of the Supreme Court was challenged by these governments. The government of Gujarat, government of Rajasthan, and the central government collectively, along with those companies who are generating renewable energy in these states, challenged it in the Supreme Court. Now, on January 19, 2024, that is in the starting of this year, multiple solar and wind energy producing companies filed applications in the Supreme Court claiming that the April 2021 order was interfering with their ability to set up business in Thar and Kutch regions. Thar region is in Rajasthan and Kutch region, as we know, is in Gujarat. The central government also appeared before the three-judge bench led by the Chief Justice of India, that is Mr. D.Y. Chandrachud, and highlighted that the practical and financial difficulties involved in implementing the decision was immense. Now, remember GIB priority areas and GIB potential areas. Potential areas where undergrounding had to be done. It was in total 80,688 square kilometers. Central government said that undergrounding in such huge area is not possible. Financial, costs are involved, plus a lot of land will have to be diverted. Apart from it, 13,550 square kilometer areas identified as priority GIB habitat where bird diverters had to be used. There were also certain problems pertaining to the cost of bird diverters. So, a plea was filed by these parties in the Supreme Court to change their decision of 2021. So, in March 2024, the case was heard again, and Additional Solicitor General Mr. Aishwarya Bhatti recommended the creation of a technical committee constituted by Ministry of Power to give recommendations on undergrounding of power lines. See, undergrounding have to be done, but up to what extent it can be done, we can see. Government was very much clear that it cannot cover the entire 80,000 square kilometer area. Senior advocate Shyam Diwan, appearing for the petitioners, cautioned the court against walking back its April 2021 decision. He said that if these lines are not undergrounded, the Great Indian Bustard will die. And if the Great Indian Bustard goes extinct, it is going to be the first major avian species to go extinct since independence in India. So, court heard both the parties. Now, the bench appeared to be sympathetic towards the centre's stand that 80,688 square kilometer of land could not be earmarked for undergrounding power lines, and suggested carving out a critical area of roughly 6,000 square kilometers where undergrounding should be done. The bench also directed both parties to come up with a list of names of a committee to tackle the GIB issue further. So this happened in March 2024, March 19, 2024, 10 days ago. So 2 days down the line from March 19, that is on March 21, the parties returned with a list of names, and the court acknowledged that its April 2021 order with a blanket direction to underground power lines in GIB potential area may need to be updated. Means in the entire 80,688 square kilometer area, which was identified to be undergrounded, where these state cables had to be undergrounded, this was a blanket decision, means the entire area, the wires will be undergrounded, has been withdrawn by the Supreme Court and has said that it needs to be updated. For updating it, a 7-member committee has been formed by the court, and it has been tasked with suggesting conservation and protection measures for GIB. Also, it has been tasked with identifying areas in the 13,000 square kilometer priority area where bird diverters had to be used, where power lines can be constructed, as well as areas that are vital for conservation of GIB. So, this committee has to find a middle ground and has to submit its report by July 31, 2024. So, as of now, this is the case. And UPSC can ask questions on Great Indian Bustard. UPSC can ask questions why their population is declining on these lines. But for the recommendations of this particular committee, let's wait till July 31st, or whenever this committee submits its report. We will be covering this issue back then also. Now, next is nuclear energy as a clean energy. Nuclear energy per se does not emit any greenhouse gases. What happens in nuclear power generation? Nuclear fuel, it undergoes fission. We saw it a few days ago when we were talking about the second stage where we have entered, the fast breeder reactor. So it undergoes fission. When it undergoes fission, a lot of heat is generated. From that heat, water is converted into steam. That steam goes on the turbine. Turbine rotates and electricity is produced. No emissions as such are there. But if I say that zero emissions are there from nuclear power generation, I would be at fault. When we construct a nuclear power plant, a lot of cement is used. While manufacturing cement, a lot of greenhouse gases are emitted. While, transporting the fuel and other essential commodities, emissions are emitted. So, technically speaking, it is not zero emissions. But yes, it is far less than coal-fired power plants. And you would be surprised that it is also less than the carbon footprint of nuclear power generation. Carbon footprint is what amount of carbon has been emitted in generating power from nuclear power plant. That takes into account all factors like construction of nuclear power plants, the reactors, the movement of people. So the carbon footprint of nuclear power plants is also less than the carbon footprint of solar and wind energy if I compare the entire lifetime. Because for manufacturing solar panels, emissions are done. For manufacturing wind turbines, emissions are done. So carbon footprint is there also. But here the carbon footprint is less. That we need to understand. And why this is in news? Because last week in Brussels, first of its kind nuclear energy summit was there. India did participate in it, and there were total 30 countries who had participated, including some head of the states participated. From India, the chief secretary in nuclear power generation, he participated from India. Now he represented India. What was the main aim? To pitch nuclear energy as an important solution to global problems like climate change and energy security. It was hosted by IAEA, International Atomic Energy Agency, which happens to be a related organization of the United Nations. Were any decisions taken at this meeting? No, as such, no decisions were taken at this meeting. This meeting was not meant to produce any decisions per se, but to build momentum for a greater acceptance of nuclear energy, which many countries continue to have apprehensions about. See, many countries have apprehensions with respect to nuclear power. So, what are the apprehensions? We should know. There was, an incident which happened in Japan in 2011. That was Fukushima accident. Fukushima nuclear power plant accident, where there was threat of leakages. We already had one of the biggest disasters in human history from a radioactive leakage from a nuclear power plant in the erstwhile USSR. That was Chernobyl. Again, during the Russia-Ukraine war, there was this crisis in the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Zaporizhia nuclear power plant is the largest plant in Europe and the 10th biggest in the world. So there was a lot of bombing in and around Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, which led to this threat of leakages, radioactive leakages from this nuclear power plant. And that is why the countries are apprehensive about this. But IAEA nowadays has started a campaign named as Atoms for Climate, in which it is aiming to minimize or dispel these apprehensions of the countries and proposing nuclear power as an alternate source of energy if we have to tackle climate change or global warming, because the carbon footprint is very less. So IAEA is that body which is a related organization under United Nations. It is an intergovernmental organization that works for the safe and peaceful use of nuclear science and technology. It has been very active in the last few years in highlighting the importance of nuclear power or nuclear energy. Now, in fact, in various COPs also, like from COP 27, which happened in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt, COP 28, which happened in Dubai, IAEA comes up with its desk over there and promotes this thing, use more and more usage of nuclear power. Now, we need to find out that is power generation from nuclear fuel really clean? I have answered this question, but yes, it is a clean source of energy with a minimal carbon footprint. There is carbon footprint, but that is minimal. It is not zero. There is negligible release of emissions during the electricity generation process. Even when the entire life cycle is considered, entire life cycle of that nuclear power plant, and entire life cycle of a coal-fired power plant, entire life cycle of a solar park, accounting for activities like reactor construction, uranium mining, and enrichment, waste disposal and storage, and other processes, greenhouse gas emissions are only in the range of 5 to 6 grams per kilowatt hour. Some estimates are there which say that it is around 50 grams per kilowatt hour, but that 50 grams per kilowatt hour is also less. According to IAEA, this is 5 to 6 grams per kilowatt hour, and since it is an intergovernmental organization, a related organization of United Nations, we will consider this. So this is more than 100 times lower than coal-fired electricity, about half the average of solar and wind generation. So it is less than solar and wind generation also, the carbon footprint of nuclear energy. It is 100 times less than the coal-fired power plants. That is but commonsensical. So that is basically a clean source of power. Now, what is India's position on nuclear power generation? Currently, we have around 23 reactors which are active in around 8 nuclear power plants in the country. And we are coming up with more nuclear power plants. In fact, the world's largest nuclear power plant is coming up in India. We aim to triple our nuclear power generation from 7480 megawatt, which is around 7.5 gigawatts currently, to 22,480 megawatts, roughly around 22,500 megawatts by 2031-32. Presently, it is around 3.1% of the total electricity generated in the country. So, we are also on this line that we are aiming to increase power generation from nuclear sources. Japan, one country which said that we are not going to generate power from nuclear power plants. This judgment or this decision was taken by Japan somewhere in 2020, 1920. But Japan has reversed its decision in 2022 because it realized the fact that nuclear power generation is a clean source, and we need to take or we need to generate electricity by using nuclear fuel more and more if we have to tackle climate change or global warming. So this is what we need to understand from this. Next is governor withholding assent to the state bills. Why this is in news? Because the state government of Kerala has filed a petition in the Supreme Court. And in their petition, they have, claimed that the governor of Kerala and the president of India, Draupadi Murmu, is withholding assent to the state bills which have been passed. Now, why the president is withholding? Because see, the governor, when it receives the bills from the state legislature, he has four options according to Article 200. First option is give assent to the bill. So if he gives assent to the bill, that is not a problem. Second option is withhold the assent to the bill. Third option is reserving the bill for president's assent. He can pass on the bill to the president. Returning the bill for reconsideration of the House. So he can return the bill for the reconsideration of the House. And in this case, if a bill is returned for reconsideration of the House and the House with or without amending the bill passes the bill and sends it again for assent of the governor, she is bound to give assent to the bill. This is what is written in Article 200. Now, governors, in many states, what they did was they withheld their assent. And, they withheld their assent without giving any timeline. So, there was a case in the Supreme Court where the Punjab governor was into question that why is he withholding assent. And the Supreme Court bench headed by CJI D.Y. Chandrachud gave a classic judgment to tackle this issue. And this happened in November 2023. We covered this issue in December 2023. The date is 19th December. So if anyone wants to watch the video, you can watch the video of 19th December as well. So what did the CJI said? He said that if the governor wants to withhold assent, he should immediately send the bill or return the bill for reconsideration of the House, stating the reason that why he or she is or withholding assent. So these 2 points were merged by the CJI. Now the problem was resolved over here on the lines of governor. But there was one area where the passage of the bills could be stalled, and that was reserving the bill for president's assent over here. And this is what Kerala has now challenged. Kerala has challenged it against its governor also, because the governor has also withheld assent to the bill. But they have brought into question the president also. The president has also withheld assent. Now, Article 201 of the Constitution says that the president, if he is withholding or she is withholding assent, he or she should return the bill to the governor to return it to the state legislative assembly with reasons as soon as possible. So that as soon as possible is a grey zone. And that grey zone is now being fought by the Kerala government. So let us go ahead. Supreme Court judgment on Article 200 in December 2023, we covered this. The judgment has linked two options available with the governor, withholding assent and returning the bill for reconsideration, as I told you. The CJI has stated that if the governor wishes to withhold assent, then she has to return the bill for reconsideration of the assembly immediately. Now, on reserving the bill for presidential assent, now there was still an area left, as I told you, where, which could still be exploited by the governor, and that was if the governor sent that bill for the assent of the president. The court did not rule on this particular aspect, and as per the law, the president can withhold his or her assent to the bill. President can resend that bill also for reconsideration of the assembly. And if the assembly passes that bill again, with or without amendments, that bill will go to the president only, not the governor. And president is not bound to give assent to that bill. But if this happens in case of governor, that if a bill goes to the governor sends it back for reconsideration, and then the assembly passes it with or without amendments, goes it to the governor again, governor is bound to give assent to the bill, but president is not. So this basically is a problem. What kind of bills the governor has to reserve for the president? Governor can technically reserve any bill for the president, but yes, if any bill pertaining to the changes in high court of that particular state happens, then compulsorily that bill has to go to the president for assent. Apart from it, any other bill which the governor feels has to get presidential assent, the governor can send that bill. Now, the president's role in lawmaking, particularly with respect to the states, Article 201 empowers the president. If assent is withheld by the president requests the governor to return the bill to the state legislature. So, president, governor, state legislature. So, state legislature passes a bill to the governor. Governor passes it to the president. If the president wants to withhold assent, president will give it back to the governor. Governor to the state legislative assembly. And when the state legislative assembly passes it again, with or without amendment, it will come to the president again. And the state legislature has 6 months to pass that particular bill with or without amendments. If the state legislative assembly fails to do so, the bill will lapse. If the bill passed once again by the state legislature, it must be sent back to the president, who, unlike the governor, is under no obligation to give assent when assessing the reconsidered bill. So this is basically the area where the Kerala government's argument is. But as I told you that the Kerala government's argument is not only against the president, it is also against the governor, because the governor is also withholding assent to a lot of bills passed by the State Legislative Assembly of Kerala, which technically means that the governor is not, upholding or obeying the judgment of November 2023, where he cannot, withhold assent. He has to return the bills immediately to the State Legislative Assembly. But the president has the powers to withhold. So Kerala is, wanting that the president's powers should also be curtailed. Now, coming on to the MCQs. Consider the following statements and mark the correct one. First is, Great Indian Bustard is critically endangered. Factual, it is completely. Its population is declining in India due to electrocutions from high tension cables. You have to answer. Which of the following states is our natural habitats of Great Indian Bustard? Here is a list of states. Completely factual it is. International Atomic Energy Agencies. Very simple question, direct question. Specialized agency, related organization, independent body without no connection with UN. It is a principal organ of United Nations. Fourth, which of the following statements are true about nuclear power generation? Nuclear power generation has a lower carbon footprint as compared to solar and wind power projects during their entire lifespan. And the greenhouse gas emissions from nuclear power plants are zero. So among this, which is the right statement? Which of the following statements are not true? So if the president returns any bill to him by the state governor, it has to be passed by the state legislature within 6 months, else it lapses. The president is bound to give assent to the bill which has been returned by him for reconsideration of the state assembly and passed again by the state assembly. The third statement, the governor can withhold his assent to any bill passed by the state legislature for indefinite period. So among these three statements, which one is true? You have to answer that. Keep into mind the judgments by Supreme Court while answering this question. This is a hint. And with this, I come to an end of today's session. I will be meeting you tomorrow now with more such informative news pieces. Till then, you guys very well know what to do. Not repeating it today. Namaste. Jai Hind.